Let's talk about some winter recommendations. I live in Canada, so winter goes till like the end of April, so there's tons of time left in the new year to read these books. I'm gonna do this by genre, so if there's a specific genre you're looking for, you can just kind of click through the video to find the ones you want. But starting off, we're gonna do some thriller recommendations. So my first winter recommendation, let's just get it out of the way now. I feel like everyone knows what this is gonna be because this is such a popular thriller, but it really is just so good, and that's No Exit by Taylor Adams. No Exit is a thriller about our main character. I wanna say her name was Darcy or Darby. She's driving home from university and she's just like trying to make it in time for Christmas, but the weather is so bad that she ends up getting snowed in at this gas station. Lo and behold, she's not the only person at this gas station. There's a couple other people stuck there as well. And when she goes outside to take a break, she finds out that there is a child locked in the back of one of these people's cars. Oh, and did I mention that child is in a cage? It's very clear that something nefarious is going on. She doesn't know who this car is. She doesn't know who she can trust. This was such a fun, wild ride. Like, from beginning to end, it is just so action-packed. The main character is one of my absolute fave main characters I've ever seen in a thriller. I find that a lot of thrillers tend to make the main characters either crazy and unreliable, or they're unlikable in some other way, or they're just bland. In this book, you get a character to root for. She is so like ingenious. All the ways that she gets herself out of these dangerous situations. She really builds a bond with this child that she's trying to save. I liked the villain. Like, everything about this was just so good. And it is absolutely perfect for this time of year. Another one I liked, and it's actually very similar to No Exit, is 5 Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richards. This is kind of the YA version of No Exit. This is about a girl who, once again, is trying to get home from university. The weather ends up being so bad that she gets stuck at the airport or the bus terminal or whatever, like flights have been canceled. There's no transportation out except for if you have a car, which she does not. But she meets someone who does, and her and like 5 other people all decide to get into this car. She doesn't know any of them, none of them know each other, and they all decide to go it together. Along the way, some shifty things start happening. It feels like somebody is trying to sabotage their drive. A lot of people didn't like this one. I personally did. I heard a lot of people say like their biggest gripe was that this character just kept making like really dumb decisions, like who would do this? And I was like, me. I would do this. I've had so many things go wrong in terms of travel, and I have done absolutely dumb shit to get out of those situations. It is just, you get desperate when you're like stuck in the middle of nowhere. There were things about this I didn't love, but like still overall just really fun, edge of your seat sort of time. The next one I have here is An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena. This is very much an Agatha Christie style murder mystery. All of these people are once again snowed in at this resort. People are being murdered and they have to figure out who did it. This one wasn't personally my favorite, but I do think it's solid. I just thought there were a couple too many perspectives, but if that's something you really enjoy when it switches perspectives and you're trying to figure out who did it along with the characters, because there is no main character, you know that you can't trust anyone, like, it is kind of fun, and I feel like it's perfect for this time of year. Maybe the reason I didn't like it was because I read it in summer, who knows? Honestly, murder mysteries like this, the locked room Agatha Christie style, are some of my favorite things for this time of year, so even though this one wasn't my favorite, I feel like a lot of people would like it. The next one I have, kind of similar, but with a bit of sci-fi, and that is 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hugo by Stuart Turton. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This has that, you know, one location murder mystery situation, except that we're following along with a main character who keeps switching bodies. Every time he falls asleep, or every time he dies, he switches bodies and has to figure out who is killing Evelyn Hardcastle. Did I say Hugo? The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hugo. I think that's what I said. Fuck those similar titles. There were just so many fun aspects of this. I love any sort of like time travel or Groundhog's Day situation. I just think they're so fun. Throw in a murder mystery, throw in like the opulence of the period piece aspects of this. I love the way the different characters he inhabits kind of affect like the way he thinks and the way he moves throughout the world and throughout the mystery. I don't think this one takes place in winter, but once again, because of that murder mystery aspect and the being in one location thing, I just feel like this one is really good for this time of year. Just sitting next to a fire with a cozy blanket, a hot chocolate, and this book, perfection. The next thing that I want to mention is the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. Once again, similar idea. Now I will say there are 4 books in this series so far. The 5th one comes out in December, I believe. Only one of these takes place in winter, but I still feel like the entire series overall would be good for this time of year because it takes place at this like boarding school. Once again, she's trying to figure out who's killing people one by one. I feel like everyone knows about the series, but no one seems to have continued on. Like, I didn't hear anyone talk about the 3rd book in the series, and the 3rd book is my favorite. The 3rd book is the one that takes place during winter too, and it very much is they all get snowed in, and then they have to figure out who's killing people, and it's so good. It's so fun. It's just a good time as long as you're okay with a more young adult version. Alright, next genre I want to talk about is horror. Winter horrors are some of my favorite. I wish more people would make horror books set in winter. I feel like it is the perfect setting for getting trapped. It is the perfect setting for like literally losing cell service, losing heat, and yet for some reason it feels rare to see winter horror books / movies, etc. I want more of them is all I'm saying. Here are the ones that I would recommend. So the first one is The Shuddering by Ania Ahlborn. This is about a group of friends who all go to this cabin. Some of them have some history together, so there's a little bit of that going on. Some people are just meeting each other for the first time and having connections, when all of a sudden, some creepy rumblings are going on in the forest. These characters were horrible. I hated every one of them. But that's what made it so fucking fun to watch them all get murdered, one by one, by this monster. I mean, creature feature, gory. This is probably the Ania Ahlborn book I've liked the most to date, and it was actually the first one I read by her. The next one is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is another creature feature, except that this one you don't see the monster as much. It focuses more on the characters. This is about our main character who has been living in the mountain with her husband for like as long as she can remember, basically. Like, it has been a long ass time since she has seen anybody else but him. And he is an abusive dickwad. And that is where a lot of the horror comes into play, is that you're watching her not only try to get away from this monster, but also try to survive her marriage when she just like pisses him off a little bit and he goes on a little tantrum. Because it takes place in the mountain, it's great for this time of year. Next one is Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgeshig Reisz. This is about an indigenous community that suddenly loses all of its power, and now they have to kind of rely on the land again to survive. But then a white person shows up and ruins everything. There's survival aspects of this, there's social commentary. This is probably one of my favorites from this list. I really, really enjoyed this one way more than I was expecting to, because it is super short and yet it does so much in those pages. There's a paranoia and a power struggle. It was just so great, and I can't wait until the sequel comes out. The next one is actually a middle grade, and yet I actually found it pretty creepy, and that was The Forgotten Girl by India Hill Brown. So The Forgotten Girl is about 2 friends who are playing in the snow one day when they discover a gravestone. It turns out there is a young girl buried there, and they decide to do some research, and while they're doing that, a bunch of creepy things start happening, and they start to wonder if they have really pissed off some sort of spirit. This was like shockingly good for a middle grade. I don't necessarily read middle grade horror, but it had such a good atmosphere. There was like a cute little friendship, and I feel like there was a really complex social commentary here for a middle grade novel. I was just super impressed with this book overall, and it would make a perfect winter read. The next book was one of my favorites that I read last year, and that is The Venue by TJ Payne. The Venue is a horror novel that takes place on the Alps. Our main character gets invited to a friend of hers wedding. She hasn't seen this friend in frickin' ages. She has no idea why she has been invited, and yet not only is she invited, but her ex-girlfriend and her entire family was invited too. It's an all expenses paid trip, so they're like, fuck yeah, we're gonna go. Little do they know that they've all been invited there for a very specific reason, and that they are going to have to kill to get out alive. Now this one probably has like less winter vibes than the rest. Really the only vibes that have anything to do with winter are the facts that they're on the Alps, but I just wanted to include it because I really, really loved it, and I think this one's great any time of year. Now, I feel like I'd be remiss if I did not mention the fact that The Shining by Stephen King, it takes place in winter and would be a good winter read, despite the fact that like I am not a Stephen King fan over here. I do think The Shining is one of his better books. And for some reason when I picked it up, I did not realize it took place in winter. I don't know how I didn't realize that, considering the premise is that Jack Torrance and his family go to this hotel and they have to take care of it over winter. that once you get there, you cannot leave because of how harsh the conditions are. And then they start to go a little mad. Despite the fact that I didn't personally find it scary, I do think it is a really great character study. I have one nonfiction self-help book I want to throw in here. I'm not a self-help sort of girl. That's just like not a genre I typically pick up. But when I did read, and I do think is actually pretty good because it has very actionable steps you can take, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I kind of feel like this now is a great time to read it because it's the end of the year, beginning of the year, we're all setting goals. He just tends to break down some like common sense ways to make small changes that will like kind of add up to big changes overall in your life. For instance, just like pairing something you need to do with something you want to do. So for instance, saying you can only watch your favorite soap opera while you run on the treadmill or whatever. Another thing is just like making things convenient for yourself, making it easy for yourself. So if you have to take pills every day, put them in a location where you're already getting a drink. If you want to practice guitar, don't put your guitar in the closet, store it somewhere you have to see it every day. It's less about changing your way of thinking and it's actually changing things around you to make your goals easier. All right, time to get into some smut. The first books I want to recommend, because once again, I saw a chance and I took it, is The Siren by Tiffany Reisz. Or just in general, the original Sinners series by Tiffany Reisz. This is my favorite series of all time. I will recommend it till the day I die. It is just so good. Tiffany Reisz is a goddess. This is a polyamorous romance. It revolves around Nora Sutherland. She's kind of the center, but there are kind of like relationships off that as well. And this series just kind of like follows them as they kind of flit in and out of her life. The found family vibes, the mature relationship aspect of this, the BDSM aspect of this, everything. So good. This is like one of the only true romances that I can say I enjoy because normally that's not my jam. I like things that have a lot of smut and little to no romance. This is actually the one series that I would say is pretty romance heavy and yet I adore it. Now the reason I'm recommending it here for winter recommendations is that Tiffany Reisz is known to do Christmas novellas every single year for this series, and so there are like a handful of Christmas novellas within the series sprinkled throughout. Next one I want to recommend is Credence by Penelope Douglas. This is my favorite Penelope Douglas romance. This is a reverse harem romance. There's an age gap, there's like an angry quiet dude, I don't know what you call that. Our main character has basically been left in the care of her like step uncle and his sons after her parents commit suicide. She has a sad backstory, obviously. This entire book is basically about her trying to come to terms with letting people love her because she just didn't really have a lot of that growing up. But my favorite part about this book personally is the setting. It takes place in this cabin up in these mountains, and the way they describe it is just so cozy and lovely. I adore just like all the outdoorsiness of this romance. It's not something I see a lot. This one was definitely one of the more smut, sex heavy of Penelope Douglas's book, which is probably why it's my favorite. I really enjoyed all three of the love interests. They were all very different. I think it's a really, really good one. Perfect for if you want some hot, sexy shit in your winter reads. Next recommendation is the Planet Barbarians series by Ruby Dixon, because like, duh. A bunch of women from Earth get kidnapped and they end up crash landing on this planet that is like nearly uninhabitable for them. But these sexy aliens come and rescue them and they all start to mate. And there's an entire series that follows along with that journey. I've read the first 4 in this series. The second one is by far my favorite. They have, I was gonna call it Grumpy Sunshine, but that's not even correct. They have, you know, the brooding, stoic guy with like the chatterbox, sarcastic girl, and I adore. I feel like if you're ever wanting to get into the series, I mean, now is the perfect time. You can read one of these books and then just walk outside and wait for your man with his spur. And the last book I want to talk about is The Unrequited by Saffron A. Kent. I've read several books by Saffron A. Kent. Honestly, they're all winners, but this one is by far my favorite, and this is the one that definitely has some winter scenes in it. This is about a girl who gets obsessed with men, and at the start of the book, she is trying to get over her last obsession. And so she figures, what better way to get over that obsession than to fall into a new one? And what could possibly be more inappropriate and self-destructive than that, than for it to be her teacher, who is kind of married. Now, weirdly enough, that's actually one of my favorite aspects of this book, is that he is going through a separation with his wife. He really badly wants to get back together with her, but they just have so much in between them, and his backstory is so like complex and nuanced that it's one of the first like asshole type love interests where I feel like I actually understood where he was coming from and I didn't hate him for it. He wanted nothing to do with the main character, and she was actually the one who kept pursuing him. That's not something that I get to see a ton of in these books. Usually it is the opposite way around. This had some absolutely great sex scenes. Saffron Kent has quite the raunchy vocabulary, and I am here for it. If you at all like student-teacher romances and want one this winter to pick up, I think this is a great one. Those are all my winter recommendations. I hope you found something in this video to read. I hope you liked this video, and I hope you come back in soon. Bye.